On this episode of Africa's Big Switch, Joshua and I explore the role of the oil and gas industry in furthering the transition to a more sustainable energy future. Our guest, James Mackinday, the General Manager of Commercial and Ventures Development at Adova PLC. With over 15 years of experience in the oil and gas industry, James now leads business development into sustainable energy futures in areas of clean mobility and renewables, amongst others. Please have a listen. Thank you, James Mackinday, for joining us today on this episode where we'll be speaking about the role of the oil and gas industry in the energy transition. I guess just the first question, just to get things started, is how did you get into the oil and gas industry?
I would say I got in here by chance because, I did my youth service with Shell at the time. And of course, I never left that environment since then. So I would say it was by chance, but I loved it. Energy is life, really. So I'm happy to remain.
Okay, I guess that was a very lucky chance then, because you could have ended up anywhere else.
Yeah, I could have been a teacher or something else. But I knew that I wanted to be within the energy space anyway. When I left school, I had opportunities to work in a bank. At the time, it was the banking sector that was the one of the high paying sectors, and I got opportunities to get into a bank. I got an opportunity to get into one of the breweries, but I chose to remain in Shell. So I love energy, and I'm not regretting it.
Interesting. And fair enough. I was going to ask, what's it about energy that made you stay? What's it about energy that you just love to be involved in?
For me, I think it's more about the fact that what you do, you can see it. What you can see the impact of what you're doing, either on the economy. Nigeria, we can tell the story of Nigeria being a monoproduct country, really. But in addition to that, the fact that you get a chance to just make an impact, to bring about solutions, and working with the company that I started with, every day was exciting.
Interesting. Thank you. Going outwards now, you've just spoken about that interest and from a personal perspective. So now let's look at it from a holistic perspective. Can you give us, I guess for the sake of our listeners as well, can you give us an overview of the oil and gas industry in Africa? So when someone says oil and gas in Africa, what do they actually mean? Who are some of the key players? What are the key activities that go on the continent? Yeah, that would be great if you can just tell us a brief overview.
Yeah, so the energy sector and oil and gas sector in particular is really a very broad sector. We can have this discussion all day talking about the sector, but primarily it's divided into three. You have the upstream, midstream, and the downstream. We all know what it means to be within the upstream space. But within the upstream space, you have many things happening there, flow from exploration to production. So there are many things happening within the space. And even there, you have the onshore, you have the shallow waters, and you have the offshore production. So only upstream sector is a massive sector on its own. And the key players in that space, starting from countries, of course, Nigeria, the largest producer of oil and gas in Africa, Angola, you have Gabon, you have other players like Cape Verde. Many countries are into oil and gas, and you see emerging producers like Mozambique and the rest. Then within the oil and gas space, of course, as the name goes, oil and gas, it means that in some places gas will be the predominant production, and in some places it will be oil. And in most cases, you would have a mixture of both oil and gas in the production mix. If you talk about private player within that space, you'll be talking about the multinationals like Shell, like Chevron, like ExxonMobil, and many others. And of course, local players are beginning to emerge, especially with the divestment of assets by the multinationals. So you have Seplat as one of the key major player in that space. And you see, you have other players that may not be as visible as Seplat, but they are doing some incredible work within the space. You have the ND Western, Aeroturn in Nigeria alone, and there are many other companies across Africa doing various interesting things, and that's within the upstream space. I'm trying to summarize that space because
Yeah.
it's a massive sector.
Yeah.
Then you have the midstream. Midstream involves transportation, refining of product, terminaling and storage, processing. So all those falls within the midstream space of the oil and gas sector. And there you have many players. Of course, Shell being an integrated oil and gas company plays across the whole spectrum. But there are other players that just focus on the midstream space in the oil and gas industry. And if you talk about the gas space in Nigeria, you have the Escravos to Lagos pipeline network really helps, which transports gas from the fields where they are produced down to Lagos, where most of the gas is used. And that's transportation still within the midstream space. There are many other things within the midstream. You can talk about the NLG that processes gas, natural gas for converting it to LNG for mostly for export business. And within the transport sector, you have the WACP line, West Africa gas pipeline that takes gas from Nigeria down to other West African countries. There's been some emerging and interesting things within the midstream space now, where you have regas facility, happening in Ghana right now, an FSU, floating storage unit that would regas LNG for converting it back into natural gas for pipeline transportation to where they will be utilized. Then, of course, you have the downstream sector, really big sector as well. And that's where my current employer operates. We have the largest network of retail stations across Nigeria today. And it could be from retailing, it could be, selling additives and lubricants. It could be, many things within the space. And if you talk about the gas space, you have LDC market, the local distribution company market that sells gas directly to industrial customers. And many other sectors within the space. You have the LPG, that's also a massive sector on its own. So, the oil and gas sector, is really very big, and there are multiple players, multiple things happening within the space. We can spend the whole day talking about it.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. Two things that you said, actually. So one is, you said something about regassing the facility in Ghana. Just for the sake of our audience, can you touch on what's special about liquefied natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas?
Okay, so as the name goes, liquefied natural gas is effectively natural gas that has been converted to liquid form for ease of transportation. So, and gas is because of the state of gas, you need very low temperature for you to be able to convert that gas to liquid. So you're talking about pressure and that is required, and temperature for you to convert the natural gas to liquid. But the whole process of converting and liquefying the natural gas is really what is interesting. And the whole thing is that you need to be able to store it in a particular way, in a particular environment, basically using cryogenic tanks for you
Yes.
to be able to move that gas from one point to the other. Else, the gas will, of course, the liquefied gas will change back to gas at certain pressure on its own, really. So you need to keep it cool for you to move it, and that's the unique thing about it. So the science, the engineering behind that is really a complex one, and that's why you don't see all countries having LNG infrastructure, because it's a massively involving process, high investment required. We know what's in the news about the NLG train 7 that's currently being developed in Nigeria, and that is really the technology and the what that process requires. And when you now move the products across countries, you then need to be able to convert it back to gaseous state, so it can be utilized for various things, and that is where the regas infrastructure comes in. So basically, as the name goes, it's to regasify the liquefied gas. And what you really need to do is to be able to take that gas, as cold as it is, then gradually boil it or raise the temperature to be able to convert it back to gaseous state. And that's the state that power companies will be able to use to generate their power, and of course for many other processes. And that's why LNG is really unique. Then LPG, as the name goes, liquefied petroleum gas. It could be sourced from two processes. It occurs naturally. So when gas wells are drilled, you've called it gas well, really, but it doesn't have one single component. It's a mixture of many things. Most cases, you have methane being the largest concentration, and is the methane that is compressed. Is the methane that is liquefied in the LNG process. But as part of that mixture, you would have the higher end, the C2, the C3s, so you would have, ethane, you would have butane. So you would have all those in the mix. So what you then do is you strip out the methane, and whatever is left, and of course strip out also the heavier and what we call condensate, and what is left in the middle is what you call the LPG, liquefied petroleum gas. It appears in liquid form. So that's one of the principal ways where you get LPG from. Another way to get LPG is in the process of liquefying methane. As that process goes, you will be taking out the heavier end, the ethane, the butane. Then once you take out those ones, of course, then you have LPG in place. There is also another way when you are refining petroleum, the naturally occurring petroleum itself, in the fractionalization process, in the refining process. LPG will be one of the first products that comes out of that, of the fraction of the refining process, and that's another way to get LPG. For that, of course, that's what we all use as cooking gas in our homes. But of course, it can do so very many more things, including power generation, and being used as aerosol. It can be used as auto gas. It can be used for so many things, and that's why those items are really very different. And of course, you need to also store it in a particular environment, still known as cryogenic tank, for you to be able to retain the product, or else it evaporates on its own. And you would have seen that if you open a gas cylinder, the gas would escape, and
Yeah.
it's in the nature of gas anyway.
So LNG and LPG are very simple terms to explain very complicated process to get to. Thank you very much for that
Yes.
explanation. I think Josh has a question for you.
Yeah, James, thank you very much for that. And your explanation on how the oil and gas sector works from upstream, midstream, and downstream, I thought that was very good and would be very educational for our listeners. A question I had for you was, what do you view as the major challenges of operating in the African market from like a political, societal, and infrastructural perspective?
So the market is complex, and that's why you don't see everybody operating in the market. It's a unique kind of environment, really, and I would explain what that means. So if I start with the political and regulatory environment, I think that for me is the biggest complexity in the oil and gas sector across Africa. We can use Nigeria as an example. I tell this story when I was transferred from Port Harcourt to Lagos. That was in 2007. I was transferred to go join a project at the time. That project, so it was at the phase where it was going to get into what you call FID stage. FID basically is final investment decision. So it's the point where you make a decision to proceed with the project, deciding that, yeah, now we want to go, we're ready to spend the money. That was the stage the project was getting into. I tell you today that that same project is still at that stage today. And that was, I'm now effectively a retiree from that company. And I was a young engineer at the time, seconded to go work on the project. It tells you the complexity of the market. In the same period, Brazil has delivered, I think, about five. I'm not sure what the exact number is, but has delivered about five, I think, FPSOs in the same period. But that's really the challenge. Nigeria was transitioning the government at the time, and there was a lot of talk about PIB. And from that 2007 till this year, when PIB was now signed into law, I think this year or last year, really, when PIB became PIA, that's what over 15 years or thereabout of just continuous talking and a discussion of the regulatory framework. And because that discussion is there, investors would hold back their funds. They won't put down investment until they know the laws or the regulation that governs the type of investment they want to make. And that, for me, is the biggest issue. And we saw it also in one of the gas infrastructure developments in one other African country, I think Tanzania, where you have that same kind of scenario. It took some time for that process to also be completed. So that's from a political regulatory point of view. Then you have the social point of view. It's not news that a lot of the multinationals are beginning to leave onshore operation and basically focusing on offshore development in Nigeria. And the question is why? Why would they want to do it? There's still oil in the ground. There's still opportunity. Why would they want to move away from that? And if you dig into it, it's really the social environment where, yes, we can absorb all the oil and gas of blames in terms of environmental impact of what they do. But I tell people that the contribution to the environmental impact involves everybody, really. And you have communities that just, in my opinion, in some cases brings up real issues. Sometimes those issues are not real, and you have a situation. So I started my career from the environment and safety part of the business, and I used to go for what we would call a JIV in those days. So a JIV is joint investigation visit that carry out when there is an oil spill. And I still recall very vividly when we visited a community, that there was supposed to be a spill. And while we were going around, we saw jerry cans of diesel that that had been used to pour oil in on the water in the community. And this was a visit with government officials and regulators and everybody else. We all saw it. The community saw it. The community leader basically just said, okay, so let's stop this GIV. And that was how that investigation was stopped. And this was, I think, around 2004. 2004. So those are some of the issues. Yes, the oil and gas, of course, companies have, they have not, in my opinion, done the best things that could be done within for the operation of their asset. But also, there's enough blame to go around. And because of all those types of challenges, you have companies basically just getting tired and wanting to leave the community or leave areas where they would be interfacing directly with communities. But also, in that same vein, because of the level of poverty in those areas, and in most cases, justified concerns of the community that they're taking products away from them to for the benefit of the rest of the country without commensurate a positive impact on their environment or on the lives of the people living there. You see them taking up arms and taking up having confrontation with these companies. And when you look at it deeply, the companies know that the communities know that the company may not be the only one impacted when they disturb the operations, but they do this simply because that is the way they will be heard. There is criminal element, and we can talk about the criminality. But at the end of the day, some communities are really just justified to stand up to say, yeah, we really want to participate in the benefit of the things that is of the product that is leaving their community. And as a result of that, disturbs the operation of the oil and gas companies and makes investment in those places difficult. We've seen it in other parts of Africa where, as a result of civil unrest, maybe even civil war in a particular country. I'm trying not to mention names of a specific country, but we've seen civil wars leading to a stoppage of development of projects that would have impacted directly on the economies of that country. So those are some of the challenges. But you have the other challenges of basically technology availability locally. So you see that most of the companies that have the capability to build big structures or do big projects would have to come from other parts of the world. And when you transfer that knowledge and that technology, it's just complex. It takes time for that to happen. And of course, it then affects the cost of project. And that's why when you do projects, oil and gas projects in a country like Nigeria, and compare the cost of that project to what a similar project in Europe, for example, you will see almost double the price. And it's because of the environmental factor in this part of the world. And the skill availability, really. Oil and gas being a very, very complex operation needs people, needs trained people, needs people that are ready to go. And you see that while the companies are trying to train up people, I mean, I'm a beneficiary of that whole training process that the multinationals provide. The fact remains that getting the right people is a difficult task around here. It takes time and to get people to the level where they can run on their own. Yeah, so those are some of the issues that affects oil and gas operation in this part of the country or part of the world. Other things that comes to mind will be the logistics that is required to support big operation for oil and gas. Especially offshore operation, you need specialized vessels, you need specialized equipment to move items across deep offshore. And because of all those, it's just complex to do oil and gas business. But like they all say, where there's risk, then there should be reward. So the reward is always very high when you are able to surmount all these challenges.
Thank you for that response. It's very interesting. You mentioned, I think, we've heard the news about all the major oil companies leaving countries like the onshore sites, or trading out of the onshore sites in Nigeria. Do you think that's pushed more towards the ESG agenda that is flaring up, particularly in the West, and how investors are more cautious of doing businesses with companies that have some social concerns, so to speak?
So I would think that it's a mixture of things. And if we take it from the angle that you have described, and think deeply about it, you would see that these same companies that are living onshore Nigeria are also making significant investment in the oil and gas sector in other parts of the world. So Shell today is investing significantly in Brazil, one of the Caribbean countries. But that same company is leaving onshore, or at least planning to leave onshore operation in Nigeria. And it's not saying that it wants to stop investing in Nigeria, by the way. It's just that it's saying, we will leave this area for you and focus on other places. So yes, the ESG agenda is on the table. It is a driver, and the companies would want to invest in places where, at least if they can reduce investment in oil and gas, they will. But that is not really the case. If you look at the figures and the numbers, investment in oil and gas operation is still increasing, and it's still going on. And it will go on for a considerable time, even with me being a renewable energy transition enthusiast and practitioner, really. You can't, the world will not function without oil and gas. If oil and gas stops today, the world will cease to function. And we already see its impact in Europe, just with the Russia-Ukraine crisis. We already see the impact. So the world as it is today still needs oil and gas to function effectively. So that investment will not stop. But what you see, and what you see that may not be communicated with companies leaving onshore operation, is really the challenges, the issues around operating in that part of the world. And the funny thing is that when these assets are sold, the oil that is produced from those assets is still bought by these companies that are leaving that space and sold in the international market. So that tells you that the need for that product hasn't reduced. It's just that the company wants to focus its attention, at least cuts its risk. So I give you one or two examples about Nigeria. So you have a company like Shell, and apologies that I'm using that company as an example, that has very strong safety culture, really very strong safety culture, but also operating in an environment where people are being killed by really, when you criminals attacking people going to the field and killing a bunch of people. I think the last one was about 7 people that were killed. It just doesn't tie with the culture of the company, because it wants to be seen as a company that takes the safety of its personnel seriously. That's an example. You have a situation where really the number of court cases that these oil companies are facing is just so much that when you compare it with other parts of the world, you don't see that same level of litigation. Then it tells you that these companies will start looking inward to say, should we be looking elsewhere for the source of this energy? And the worst part of it is that other parts of the world are beginning to also provide opportunities. So when they look at the risk and the reward, it's easy to make a decision to say, we'll walk away from this. But you can't also take that the issue that you have mentioned away as as a force or as a reason to want to move away. But it's not the only reason, because the world still needs this energy. And if these companies are working away from these opportunities, it tells you that it's not only because of the impact on the environment. There are many other things driving it.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think that's clearly understood. It's a combination of factors that led to that decision. I was going to ask you, based on all the challenges you've mentioned, that could make it difficult for people to operate in Nigeria, not Nigeria, in Africa in general. Are there any countries in particular you would say have that these risks are less pronounced?
So I wouldn't say there are countries that the risk are less pronounced. There is the tendency to think, oh, Ghana has it together, maybe even better than Nigeria. But when you scratch the surface, you will find a few things that may make investment in some places also challenging. So every part of the continent come with its own challenge. And that's the beauty of doing being into the extractive industry business. There will be a basket of issues or challenges. It's a mixing and matching whatever is in there that will find the right path for you. And that's why risk management is a very strong part of oil and gas opportunity maturation, because it tells you need to then look at different risks for different countries, for different sector, and then, find a way to mitigate the risk and finding a way to then work, within the boundaries of the risk that is available. And I think when you look at it, the reward is just enormous. The reward, when you look at what potentially could come out of your investment, compared to the risk that you see in the market, it's just unbelievable. And there are examples to support that. From companies investing a few billions of dollars to develop an asset and making multi-billion-dollar returns on that particular investment. We can give examples of such. So yeah, I think the risks are there, the challenges are there, but the opportunities are just enormous.
Thank you. I think that's a great way for us to kind of move towards the energy transition topic, because I really like the last thing you said about with high risk comes, high rewards. And looking at oil and gas is often seen as a transition fuel to cleaner sources, especially in the West. In Africa, or in Africa's perspective, how does the oil and gas players, how do they position themselves for the energy transition in Africa?
Okay, so I think what we know for sure today is that the world is moving, and the world will transition into cleaner sources of energy. Will it happen in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? It's open to debate, really. But the world is transitioning. But what I see is that Africa, like the rest of the world, have seen that having these resources, we would maximize the resource, and as a result, would rely on gas as a transition fuel. And you saw Nigeria launched its energy transition agenda, basically stating clearly its pathway to net zero, and by 2060, that's when Nigeria intends to be a net zero country. So that tells you that the continent is, and as a leader in the continent, it tells you that we are building towards an energy transition world. And that the same goes for the rest of Africa. You see opportunities for a renewable source of energy development in many parts of the continent. You see, I think Cote d'Ivoire, there was a bidding process that happened recently for the development of renewable energy source using solar as the base to generate power. And you're seeing it all across Africa. So the continent is positioning and ready. And I think really it is in the best position to also be a major leader in the energy transition discussion. And Nigeria being one of the leaders in the continent is driving the conversation. We have now launched this. Other parts of Africa would follow suit. But what is sure is that gas will be a part of the energy transition story, and we would move into the other renewable energy sources as the case may be. And if you have systems running on gas, then having a conversation about hydrogen being a fuel will not be too much of a leap when that technology fully matures and becomes really commercial.
Well, thank you. I think I like your last point again on hydrogen. I think especially in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is really considering its options of producing hydrogen, especially for large scale production. You mentioned something about the continent's being in the best position to undergo this energy transition plan, or there are various energy transition plans. So some critics might say that um, Africa should focus on, I guess, energy access and should be less focused on reaching net zero. While some people might say we can do both. How feasible is it for us to be able to achieve both energy access, energy security, and energy transition towards a cleaner energy future?
So I think the people, and I've been in the rooms where you hear people say, "Oh, what Africa needs is energy access." It's when you hear that kind of statement, it's coming from a place of lack of knowledge of what the market looks like in Africa.
Mhm.
Africa is such a diverse place, really, really diverse, that you can't say, "Oh, one size fits all." Go solve energy access and you solve the problem.
Yep.
Because even if you take Nigeria as just a simple example of what energy solution will be required, you would easily find out that what a Lagos-based person needs is very, very different from what someone based in a village in the northern part of the country. So, are there 90 million or thereabouts people that need access to energy in Nigeria? Of course, yes. But are there also people within the same country that needs EV charging solution? Of course, there are, and we already see it. We're the part of the continent that I live, for example. My problem is not energy access. My problem is the reliability of supply. My problem is also price of what I pay for energy. What that means is that for you to address the energy needs of Africa, especially or particularly sub-Saharan Africa, first you need to understand the market split. Then after understanding the way the market is split, you know that there are solutions for different parts of the continent. So if you take Ghana, for example, the problem in Ghana is not energy access. The problem in Ghana today is the price they pay for energy. And of course, the ability of the markets to pay. So if you're proposing a solution to Ghana and you're talking about energy access, you're basically wasting time. So the solution that country need is basically to find a solution that makes power generation cheaper for them. If you go to South Africa, today it's about reliability of energy, because now they're in the space where they do load shedding. So if you bring solution that makes the grid system reliable, then you have provided a solution that addresses their need. But if you come to Nigeria, you know that there are parts of Nigeria that needs energy reliability. There are parts of Nigeria that need energy access. And there are segments of the country today that are running on the dirty fuel. And today, Nigeria spends $14 billion on self-generation of power, mostly spent on the dirty fuel. So if you bring solution that talks about transitioning from the dirty fuel to the more cleaner energy sources, that is a solution that's part of the market needs. So, you can't say this is what Africa needs. It's a mixture of things.
Yeah. I really like that response because I think it kind of justifies the need for the episode on the podcast because it's a really complex landscape that I guess due to some misinformation, some people might think there's a one size fits all, but the different regions, even within a country, need or require different things. So thank you very much for that explanation. I think you've captured it perfectly. Josh, I think you might have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Balaji. So yeah, I was going to ask. So what should we be hopeful for across the continent now? We know that Dangote's refinery is coming online, but we don't really know what that means for Nigeria or the rest of Africa, and also the new energy transition plan that Nigeria has. What does that mean? And necessarily, what plans do you think the government will put forward to encourage the energy transition?
So I think, and I said this to people, that today Africa has the most exciting opportunities for energy in the world, really. And I say that after paying attention and doing research and studies around energy needs and energy transition across the world. Why did I say that? So I'm saying this with the risk environment in mind. So while there are opportunities, the risks are really high, and finding a way to overcome the risk or mitigate those risks will then be the challenge. But I give you the example of some of the opportunities that are emerging across multiple countries in Africa. If you talk about hydrogen today, Africa is one of the few places in the world that solution can be viable, because if you talk about green hydrogen, we do have access to regular sunlight in most part of Africa. So that you can generate hydrogen using that system, and you would have a solution there. In the part of the world where hydrogen is pushed as a solution, really, sunlight is a challenge. And that is one of the things that Africa brings to the table. Part of what we also bring, if you talk about blue hydrogen, we already have natural gas. So we can convert the natural gas to hydrogen rather than converting it to LNG, for example, or converting it to LPG. We can take it straight from the place of production to hydrogen generation. And that is also what Africa can offer. And good enough, many countries in Africa have gas as a natural resource. So that is in that space. If you talk about using solar as a solution, we can be here all day talking about the potential of solar as energy solution in Africa. And that's also exciting. It's an opportunity that is really yet untapped. And so if I take a country like Nigeria, for example, if you look at the energy need of the market today, an average Nigerian spend money to buy power from the national grid that is very unstable, then has a generator in his backyard and buy fuel today. And that is an opportunity to convert. People are already paying significantly high amount of money to generate power for themselves. And that is an opportunity to convert to cleaner source of energy. So you see that the level of potential growth in the market is just significant. But people, sit outside and think, oh, but Africa is poor. And while you can't run away from the fact that Africa has a level of poverty, the fact remains that Africa also already buy products that are being produced across the world, and they're spending quite a lot of money buying those products. So there is a market. Are there parts of the markets that are at the bottom of the pyramid that needs to grow? Absolutely. But the more you provide access to energy to people, that's how you move them out of poverty. Because if I have an opportunity to generate power, to have reliable power, if I have a small barbing shop, I'll be able to operate more regularly and spend less money buying fuel and chasing around diesel. So those are opportunities that could be a nest in Africa, and it goes across multiple countries in Africa. And we can talk about, is it generating power using hydro solutions? The capacity or the capability in the market is just enormous. So I think it's just for the world to see that, look, the risks exist, but there is opportunity also, and let's chase the opportunity, make the investment. In the words of one of the well-respected people in the industry, put the risk aside, but make the investment. Look at opening the market. You will see that there are opportunities. And we've seen people come into this sector, put in money, and, they're smiling for it.
Amazing. Thank you very much for that. I think that's a wonderful way to segue into our next question, about you ask you the opportunities within Africa. And that's amazing. Thank you.
Yes, it is. It is indeed, because we have this final question that we used to round up the podcast, which looks at, it's a very simple question. It's not specific. It doesn't have to be specific to energy. But the question is, if you were to travel anywhere in Africa on an all expense paid trip, where would it be and why?
So I like nature. So anywhere that I get a chance to see the beauty of the diversity of the natural environment is what I like to do. So what does that mean in practical terms? I would like to get to the Sahara Desert. I'd like to just see what is going on in that place and the beauty of that environment. I like to be inside the rainforest. By the way, I participated in a trip to the to one of the rainforests in Brazil, the largest actually in the world, where we basically were catching and tagging birds for 2 weeks, basically trying to study the environment of the place and how water flows, and the interaction between the types of trees and the water reserve in the place, and how birds disperse fruits across that natural environment. An exciting thing. I'm joining a trip to the Gambia in 3 weeks, basically just going to do the same thing. And so those are the things I like to do. I like to just, be in nature and just, because maybe that's driven by the fact that I grew up in Lagos. I'm a city boy, so I'm looking for ways to get out of the city.
and there are no remote place. There are no places as remote as the Sahara Desert and the rainforest. So I see why you picked those. Thank you very much for that response.
No, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.